presentation is the same as the title of my book, Education for Transformation: The Keys to Releasing the Genius of African American Students. So this presentation will by no means be exhaustive, but my goal for this afternoon is to give you some specific strategies that you would be able to implement on Monday. So just to do a quick survey, how many of you all have ever been to a training, been to a workshop, been to a conference, and when you left there, you didn't come back with anything tangible that you could utilize in the classroom? Let me just see a show of hands. Okay, look around the room because you're not alone. All right, so just want you to know, this isn't that kind of party. Ashe? Ashe. All right, so hopefully we'll give you a number of things that you will be able to use right away. And then also as you're doing your strategic planning over the summer for next year. Right? So I always like to begin by letting people know about someone who's very influential in my life as an educator. And that's none of our forum equation, second also known as Dr. Asa Hilliard. Can I see a show of hands of those of you all who have heard of him or familiar with his work? See a few people. Okay, so this is a brother who made it his mission to study those educators and those schools who got the best results out of African American children in some of the most challenging situations. Ashe? And so, with that in mind, do you think that it would be worth taking time to look at some of the results of his research? Yes. Absolutely. So he scoured not just the state, not just the country, he scoured the planet, looking for examples of people who got the best results in some of the most challenging situations. And then what he did was, when he looked at their practices, he began to codify and quantify what were the specific methods that they were using. Okay? And he had some tremendous finds. He has a book called Saba, The Reawakening of the African Mind, which deeply inspired me in the work that I do as well. So I definitely want you to be aware of his work, and you'll see some of it in my work. I always like to start with what I call the 5 magic words. If you repeat them after me: uncommon accomplishments, require uncommon commitment. One more time: uncommon accomplishments, require uncommon commitment. Now the reason I call these the 5 magic words is because when I read those words, it makes me do the things that I don't always want to do. And as teachers, that may be the case with us as well. Sometimes we have to come in early. Sometimes we have to what? Stay late, right? And sometimes that might not be reflected in the paycheck, right? But you know what? There's so many gratifying things about what we do that cannot be counted in a paycheck. Like, you know, when I run into my students out in the community. Raise your hand if you've ever run into your students in the community. Now I know, I'm an educator as well, so I know sometimes when you see some of your students in the community, you're going in the opposite direction, right? You're like, I don't want them to see me. But I always have students who will come up to me, and I tell my students, as you get older, I want you to make sure if you see me somewhere that you reintroduce yourself to me, because you'll be older, you'll be bigger, I will still look the same, I still have a bald head and a little bit of hair on my face, right? And so I run into them everywhere, all over the country as a matter of fact. Even though, I spent my time teaching in 4 years in Newport News, Virginia, and then 10 years in Atlanta, and then me and my wife operate a school for grades 1 through 5 in Lithonia, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta now. But it's a beautiful thing when I run into my students. I was taking a trip to Egypt and Ghana. And so I was with a group, and we were up at JFK Airport in New York. And I'm going through the last customs check before I get on the plane. And the person who's checking my passport looks up and says, "Mr. Akua, is that you?" And this is a young lady I taught when she was in the 7th grade in Atlanta. So it's a beautiful and wonderful thing when I run into my students all over. One of my students is in Senegal, in West Africa right now. And I had him when he was in 7th grade, and he was failing everything. And he told me that as a result of being in my class, it shaped the trajectory of his life, and now he's building schools in West Africa. When he was in my class, he loved language arts. I taught language arts, so he had an A in my class, but was literally failing every other class. And I said, "Hey man, some of these skills that you're showing in my class need to translate over into the other classes, right?" And so it's always amazing, my former students contact me on Facebook and things of that nature, but it all philosophy. Uncommon accomplishments require uncommon commitment. Ashe? Here's another set of powerful words. Dr. Carlos Escoito tells us you cannot be cautious and extraordinary at the same time. And for me, that was particularly powerful because I was in schools and school systems that were in the box in everything that they were doing. You know, the creativity was not where it should have been. The building of bridges and connections with students was not where it was, and they were wondering why the student achievement was not where it should be. They were wondering why discipline problems were up and academic achievement was down. And it all, for me, it went back to what Dr. Escoito was saying. You cannot be cautious and extraordinary at the same time. In order to reach our children today, we need some powerful and creative educators who are willing to step outside the box and go for it all. All right? And with that in mind, we want to put the world back into the hands of our children by equipping them to be successful. So now here's where this monologue becomes a dialogue, because I want to hear from you all. I want to hear about some of the challenges. I want to hear about some of the triumphs and the victories. I want to hear about what you're dealing with in the classroom. And the first thing I want to ask you is, what are the assets our children bring to the classroom every day? We hear about all the negative things out in society that youth are doing today. But I want to find out from you, what are the assets that they bring? What are the positive things that they bring? Yes, sir? Energy. They bring a lot of energy. A lot of energy. How many of y'all would like to have some of that energy that they bring to the classroom every day? Absolutely. Who else wants to share one? What are the assets?
Humor.
I can't hear you.
Humor.
Humor, definitely. Absolutely. And that's one thing I had to learn how to do as an educator, was I definitely had to learn to laugh. I remember one time in the classroom, I was really uptight and I was trying to get the class's attention. You know, I couldn't get everybody to quiet down so I could teach and everything. And I know this never happens here, but I went off on my class. I know y'all don't do that, right? But I went off on my class. Like, y'all, listen, everybody sit down and be quiet. And then there was one young lady she's kind of laughing under her breath. And I'm like, oh, you think it's funny, Melissa? Do you think it would be funny if I took you to the office right now and called your mother? And she's still smiling. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, come on, we're going to go right now. We get into the office, I'm like, why would you disrespect me like that in front of the class? I said, Mr. Akua, I was trying to tell you that my zipper was down. So, we have to learn how to laugh. Ashe? What else are some of the assets? Who wants to share? Yes, sir?
Tons of questions.
Tons of questions. Very inquisitive. And what's really strange about us as educators, we want children to be inquisitive, right? But let's keep it real. Sometimes it gets on your nerves, right? Okay, hold on. I haven't answered the first question. You're already on question number 12, okay? So the inquisitiveness is good, but then we've got to kind of rein it in to be able to answer some of those questions. What else? What are some of the assets? Yes? Very strong will. You must know my son. Oh, see, I taught middle school for 14 years. And I thought I understood. You know, because parents would come up to me all the time, Mr. Akua, you just don't understand. Thank you so much. What you've done for my son is amazing. What you've done for my daughter is amazing. I would be very gracious. I would say, you know, thank you. No problem. I love what I do. Your son and your daughter is wonderful. They were like, no, you don't understand. I thought I understood until I had a middle school child at home who feels me right now, okay? It's one thing to deal with them from 8 to 4. And then at 4, you can leave and go home. But when you go home and have to deal with it, it's a whole nother world. So what was that word you used again? Strong will. And my wife tells me that I can be strong-willed at times, and we tend to reproduce after our kind. So, strong will, being strong-willed is a good thing if you're being strong-willed about the right thing, right? So that's something we gotta figure out how to mold and shape. What are some more of the assets that they bring to the classroom? Yes.
Creativity. Oh.
I didn't hear you. Creativity, absolutely. They see things that many of us, you know, don't see, or they're able to take it and twist it and turn it in ways that we never would have imagined if we give them the opportunity to. Ashe? What are some other things? Assets, yes.
It kind of goes along the line with creativity, but their imagination, especially in 5th grade, I see
yes.
It blows me away.
Imagination. Imagination and creativity go hand in hand, and our students bring all of that. Now, I wanted to make sure that we covered this part because, as I said, a lot of times, all you hear is negative things about Another thing that we have to be careful on, and again, I know this doesn't happen here, but I gotta say it because it happens a lot of other places. You have to be careful of what you speak about our children. Ashe? You go into some teachers' lounges around the country, man, you get to, you may run into a verbal drive-by by the lounge mouth. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about, right? And I know this doesn't happen here, but maybe at a school that you used to teach at, raise your hand if you've ever heard either faculty, staff, administrator bad-mouthing a student. Raise your hand if you've ever seen that before. I need for you to understand that that is polluting the atmosphere. Because if you start speaking those things, and that's the image that you hold of that child in your mind, you will begin to treat them like the things that you were saying about them. And here's one thing that I discovered about our children. They're very intuitive. Ashe? They know if you don't like them, whether you tell them or not, by your body language, by the way that you interact with them. Ashe? Anything else that we want to add in terms of student assets? I think I covered them all. Go ahead.
I just want to say their resilience.
Very resilient, yes, very, very important. My upbringing was very different than the upbringing of many of the students here, and the upbringing of many of the students that I've taught over the years. And so I had to make some serious adjustments to get into their world, to try to see things through their eyes, right? So that's a very important point of resilience. Here's a few that I wrote down, and I'm going to add resilience to a couple of other ones that you all mentioned to it. You said inquisitive, energetic, intuitive, intelligent, creative. So I'm going to begin to add some of the other ones that you all added to that list, okay? But now what I want us to look at is what many teachers are telling me is happening around the country, that there seems to be a values crisis. Let me see a show of hands if you think that there is a values crisis in terms of the values that we would like for them to espouse. So tell me what you see on the flip side of the assets in terms of this values crisis. What are you seeing that concerns you about your students? It could be what you're seeing in the classroom, what you're seeing in the school in general, or it could be just something that you're seeing in terms of attitude behavior. What are some of the things that concern you that you're seeing that you want to see change? Who wants to start? Yes. Lack of self-respect. Okay? Very, very important. What else? What else? Yes.
Not being able to see sort of the future consequences of what's happening and being so in the now and wanting what I have right now and not.
So that goes back to what I was telling them about the game of chess, where you have to think 3 or 4 moves ahead, so that you can determine where you'll be, so that you don't get put in check or checkmate, right? Okay. What are some other behaviors or things that concern you about what you're seeing in our students? Yes.
Selfishness, it's all about me.
Selfishness, individualism. And one of the things that's interesting, the more we study and get them rooted in their history and culture, they will discover that the only time we were ever able to create anything of substance that was lasting was when it was done together. So we can accomplish more by working together than operating individually. Ashe? And that goes for us as a staff as well. What else? What are some other behaviors or things that you're seeing that concern you?
Sometimes the motivation.
The motivation. So kind of like apathy
Yeah.
and so forth. Okay, yeah. Sometimes they're not as motivated to achieve as we would like for them to be. Okay. What else?
There's a follows up on what you were speaking about with online identity and just establishing a positive online identity.
Yes, very, very important. Establishing a positive online identity, and that's something that we can start with them here through some of the activities that we get involved with. So that's a very good point. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Attracted to negative things in pop culture and media.
Yeah, what is that about? Attracted to negative things. The very negative things that are destroying their own community. The very negative things that are destroying their own family. Could that be by chance? I don't think it's by chance. And so one of the things that we have to do as conscious educators is help them to carefully deconstruct the world that they're living in and critically examine what's going on. That was something that I was attempting to do this morning with them and some of the issues that we discussed. Ashe? What else are you seeing that disturbs you in terms of behavior? Yes?
I think often with the boys that they put sports at the expense of academics.
Sports at the expense of academics. That's a really good point. I was just talking to Mr. Wilson right before this about, he was showing them a video, it's called Broke.
Yes.
And it's about athletes who are now broke. And they tell their stories about, how is it that you can make millions and millions of dollars and now you don't have any money? And their stories were very, very interesting. And they didn't have good guidance in terms of how to handle money and things of that nature. So showing them the flip side, the real side of the industry is very, very important. And when you can do that, it gets them to think critically and analytically and reflectively. And so what we were talking about is presenting them with some different examples of that. We can use that with entertainment and with sports. You could present them with a sample contract, like 3 different contracts, and they have to choose which contract that they're going to sign based on, this set of criteria. Okay, with this contract, you get, $50,000 up front, you get a $200,000 signing bonus, but X, Y, and Z takes place. And then you've got another choice of this one. Well, that requires reading skills, that requires comprehension skills, that requires those chess skills of thinking, several steps ahead. So these are the kind of real-world things we want to begin to get them to think about. But they are deeply entrenched in sports and entertainment. What else? Anything else that you want to add?
A negative self-image and also a negative community image.
Ooh, negative self-image and negative community image. Okay? And if they come with that, it's okay, but hopefully over the period of the year, we will help them to see that they can be the ones to transform not only themselves, but their community. Okay? Anything else? Yes?
The use averages relate to their peers and surroundings.
I didn't hear the first part.
The ease to which they assimilate to their peers or surroundings.
So one of the things that they do is they just start going along to get along rather than changing their course. Very, very important. Very, very important. Okay? And so, relative to what you just said, here are some of the things that I've seen. And again, you can chime in if you want to, but as I go around the country, and I've been all over the country, and it's something when you start seeing the same things, no matter what city you're in, you start seeing the same behaviors and the same outcomes and so forth. This values crisis creates what Dr. Naeem Akbar is called an alien identity, and that is an identity that is outside of the best of your own tradition. So how many of y'all remember the first time I came here about a month and a half ago, right? And I gave them a completely different definition of what it means to be black, right? Than most of what they're familiar with. Well, most of them are entrenched in an alien identity. And I like to say identity determines activity. If I think I'm a thug, I'm going to act like a thug. If I think that, that I'm dumb, when I come to your class, how am I going to act? I'm going to act dumb. And then if I am intelligent, and it's not cool to be intelligent, then I'm going to act stupid because I don't want people to figure me out. Ashe? Identity determines activity. So who I think I am will be reflected in my behavior. Does this values crisis create antisocial behavior? You tell me, yes or no? Yeah? Does it create self-destructive behavior? Does it impact work ethic? Critical thinking skills. Here's the one that gets me. It impacts the ability to envision. I had a student to tell me, a 14-year-old, he's in 8th grade, he said, Mr. Akua, if I can just make it to 17, I might have a chance. And I'm thinking to myself, what has this young brother seen that makes him think that he might not get to 17? Well, as the year went on, I found out. He told me, he had seen so many of his friends killed that never made it to 17. And he didn't know if he would be able to make it himself. Okay? And then, conditioned attention span. I think most of us would probably agree that most of our children play too many what? Video games. If they're not playing video games, they're watching TV, right? Well, those images in video games are flipping, so many times per second. And it's holding their attention, right? And so, when they come to class a lot of times, their minds are working so much faster than our delivery of instruction. Ashe? And so that creates a problem. But it's like the same thing when you're watching TV. If you tune into to a program at the top of the hour, how many minutes will it probably be before this commercial? On average, approximately. What do you think? You're looking at probably about 8 to 10 minutes. About every 8 to 10 minutes, there's a commercial break. And the commercial break lasts about, a couple minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. So, if I watch too much television, then what is my mind conditioned to expect every 8 to 10 minutes? A break or a transition of some sort, right? And so that's something we should take into account at the beginning of the school year. I'm not saying do that throughout the school year. As the school year goes on, we may have a lesson that goes on, starts off 8 to 10 minutes, then a transition. As the year goes on, you may go 12 to 15 minutes, then transition. As the year goes on, 20 minutes, 22, 25 minutes, and then a transition. But the point is, take into account the fact of this conditioned attention span. Because what do you do when you're watching something that you don't want to watch on TV? What do you do with the remote? You change the channel. And if you're not careful, your students will change the channel on you. And I know it's in the afternoon, you probably had your lunch, and I'm looking at you, and some of y'all trying to change the channel on me. So we're going to switch, and we're going to go through a little transition ourselves here for just a moment. So what I would like for you to consider is these different things. Naeem Akua tells us the first function of education is to provide identity. In just a minute, we're going to do an activity that's going to require you to work collectively and cooperatively with everybody. But consider this real quick. He said the first function of education is to provide identity. Before you even get to the ABCs, before you get to phonics, before you get to addition and subtraction, before you get to any of the things that are in the textbook, the first function of education is what? Identity. Because remember, everything flows out of who you are. Well, interesting thing happened to me a few years ago. I was logging on to the internet and checking my email. And this picture came up along with the news headline of the day. And it said, identity theft is the fastest growing crime in America. Now, let me see a show of hands. How many of you all know somebody or you yourself were a victim of identity theft? Let me see a show of hands. Put your hands way up. Keep them up. Look around the room because I want you to see how many people this is. This is very interesting because wherever I ask this question, hands down, wherever I ask this question, 70 to 90% of the audience always raises their hand. Okay? So I was a victim of identity theft myself. I was in the studio with my videographer, and we were editing video. And a person broke into my van, that time I had a van, and stole not one, but 2 checkbooks. So rule number 1 is what? Don't leave your checkbook in your car. Stole my personal checkbook and my business checkbook. And I called the bank immediately, shut down the accounts, but it didn't matter. This person was already out there having a good time with my little bit of money. I mean, this person had gone to Walmart, got a new TV. I'm looking at all this online, right? Went to the grocery store, but I guess was too hungry to wait until he got home to eat, so he stopped by Subway, got himself a sandwich, right? Having a good time with my little bit of money. But in that experience, I had an instant awakening. And the instant awakening was this, that many of our children are victims of cultural identity theft. Someone has stolen their rich history, heritage, and culture and made the very students that we teach think that they come from a race of pimps, players, criminals, and thugs. Ashe? And remember, since everything flows out of identity, that's very problematic because what is identity theft? That's when someone steals your personal information and they use your personal information to gain access to your wealth. And it can take months to change that around, sometimes even years. But psychologists have a profile of how to deal with victims of identity theft because they know the victim becomes confused. Raise your hand if you know some students who are confused. Keep your hand up around the room. Victims become angry. How many of y'all know some children that are angry? I mean, for almost no reason. They come to school, they're already angry. Nothing's even happened, right? Victim becomes disillusioned and must spend considerable time cleaning up the mess. We're dealing with a situation of cultural identity theft. Ashe? And so this is what I want you to be aware of as you plan your lessons and things. So with that in mind, what I would like for you to do is to turn to page 3 in your training packet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass out a card to everyone. When you receive your card, please keep it face down until I ask you to turn it over. Okay? Now, how many questions are on that sheet? 28. Okay. And let's make a hypothesis, which is an educated? Yes. So, what do you think you're going to do, or what do you think is on this card? Any guesses?
The fill in the blank.
Yeah, this is going to be one of the answers, but you just said you have 28. So obviously, you've got to find someone who has the answers that you're looking for. Ashe?
Ashe.
And please make sure that I get my cards back. Sometimes I forget. Oh, keep face down on me. Now, we may not have an opportunity to get to all of the answers, but what I want you to do is once I start this music, don't read it yet, don't read it yet. Once I start the music, what I would like for us to do is to start answering the questions. Okay. Now, all right, what I'd like you to do is flip your card over, please. And you may begin. Once you find out where the answer is to the card that you have, fill it in, and then you can start circulating around the room to share information with others. But please make sure that you're just exchanging. So I don't want to see groups of people standing around. You shouldn't be with more than 2 or 3 people at a time. All right? You may begin. You're going to come across some quotes that you like. So what I want you to do is put a star next to your favorite three. Ashe?
Ashe.
Star next to your favorite three. You may continue. have a few extra cards that I think I may have. A couple on each side here. Right here.
If I would have bet, I would have known it would have been Nicole Reeves. The first one. If you were to ask me to bet, I would say
Obviously.
Oh, let me see if I can.
17, I don't have either. 14. This is 21. 21? Of transformation. 21.
That might be one.
Oh, it is incumbent. Intelligence. Intelligence.
What number? Say the number.
27 is intelligences. Intelligences.
What is it?
Intelligences.
There's a couple on this side too.
How do I spell compass?
8, 765, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Take another 10 seconds to put one card next to your favorite 3, please. While you're doing that, I'm going to collect the card. All right, now what I want to do is find out which of these quotes was most important to you. Which of these quotes resonated with you or your experience as an educator and working with young people? Who wants to start off with one of their favorite quotes? Yes, sir.
We are the children of those who chose to survive.
Wow. Julie Dash, what number was that?
17.
Number 17. And why did that particular quote jump out at you?
The word chose, like, everyone has hardships, everyone has obstacles, and some people choose to work hard and persevere. And that's my parents. They chose to, they one of 7, one of 9. They were not getting, parents weren't paying for college, and they found a way to do it themselves, and they chose to.
Got it. So then we can say that success boils down to the choices that we make. Daily decisions determine your destiny. Ashe? All right, so let's give him a round of applause. Yes, who else wants to share one? Yes.
Number 3, we can change the world if we first change ourselves.
Dr. John Eric Clark, the eminent historian. Why did that one jump out at you?
That one jumped out at me because a lot of times, well, always, it's easier to change yourself before you try to change others. And even when you deal with trying to create a new habit, we all know how difficult that can be for ourselves. So that focus is turned internally as opposed to projecting, telling others what they should be doing, what they should not be doing. You want to model what that looks like, and then it's easier to transfer that.
And that's so important because just the fact that if you're doing that, you're vibrating at a different frequency. You're radiating a different type of energy when you're coming from that perspective of changing yourself first. Ashe? And that makes a big difference because one of the things that I've found is the difference between mediocre teachers and master teachers is that master teachers have an understanding of the power of presence. In other words, even if they don't say anything, their very presence is transformational in nature. Even sometimes when they're not even there, their energy is still there. And so that's in the way that you set up your room. Maybe you're out for a day, and maybe a student speaks up when they see other students who are off task and say, well, if Mr. So-and-so was here, you wouldn't be doing that sort of thing. So this is very key. Would you read that quote one more time?
We can change the world if we first change ourselves.
We can change the world if we first change ourselves. The other thing that's really important about this is, in many cases, when you talk to educators, they want to lead with what's wrong with the children, rather than leading with what's right about the children as we did. And so if we realize that if we change ourselves, then the children will change in line with what we do, that's more of a position of power. Okay? So let's give her a round of applause for sharing that. Who else has one that they want to share? Yes, brother.
It's easier to build a child than to repair an adult.
Easier to raise a child than to repair an adult. Why did you like that one?
Because I unfortunately know how true it is for just myself. Having, grown up not really learning great study habits, not learning even just a lot of more basic things about sort of self-identity and things. Having to figure out who I was, figuring out what I was all about, figuring out what it means to work hard and what it takes to be successful was really hard because I went through that process when I was already in college and a little bit after college. So looking at the students where they are today and just being like, trust me, You don't want to have some of the experiences that I've had and some of the experiences that other people that I know had. I'm telling you now, get this right now, and you won't have to go through some of those things.
Yeah.
And also understanding that I was lucky because the margin of error for me, was a wide margin of error because I had a lot of support around me. I had a lot of people there. When I failed, it didn't make that, it mattered. But I didn't suffer as much as I think, the situation is different for a lot of our kids. They're not going to get the second chance that I get. They're not going to have somebody there telling them it's okay. They might only have 1 or 2 chances.
Certainly, and you and I had similar experiences in that regard. I almost fell through the cracks, and I had some support systems around me, which means that's why I'm all the more intent on making sure that they get this. Let's do a quick survey. How many of y'all know some adults in need of repair? Let's see show of hands. Oh my goodness! Look around the room. Look around the room. Right. So the quote is, "It's easier to raise a child than to repair an adult." Very, very important. All right. So let's give them a round of applause. Who else wants to share one that you like? Yes, sir.
An educational process is not seen only as acquired knowledge, it is seen as a process of transformation.
Dr. Wade Nobles, what number was that?
Number 21.
Number 21, process of transformation. Why did you like that one?
Because this is studying a lot of the traditional ways of teaching and sort of like the rites of passage, something that you have to go through over an extended amount of time in order for you to really consider it as a master's or it goes beyond this the education in the sense where you're sitting in a classroom and it becomes more process and it's like a lifestyle.
Right, process and a lifestyle. So consider this. When you talk about this process of transformation that these ancient systems of education use, I'm going to ask you some questions. These are not trick questions, but I want you to answer them in unison. How many months are in a year? 12. Let's subtract 2 months for the summer. How many months do you have left? You got 10 months left. Let's take away 2 weeks for winter break. Let's take away another week for spring break, and then another week for the various holidays that take place in between. How many months do you have left? 9 months. So what you just told me is it's not a classroom, it's a class wound. Did y'all get that? Yeah. Education is a process not of acquiring knowledge, but a process of transformation. It's a classroom, not a classroom. No, I don't have a speech impediment. Okay? And in your classroom, you're going to give birth to something at the end of June this year. Right? And you get to determine what that is based on the quality of instruction, but I would say even based more on who you are as an educator and as a human being. Ashe? All of that is reflected into what you're going to